Walk you through the closing process and take a look. I've got my T accounts carefully arranged, so my revenues are on the right side and then expenses are on the left side. Income summary, owner's capital, and owner's drawings are in the middle. There is a reason for that, and I think this visual presentation really helps you to understand it. So we've got income summary account in the middle here. It's a temporary account that we're going to use for about 3 minutes, and it helps us close the books manually. If you were to use computer software, then you don't have to use that account. The software will be able to carefully close all the revenues straight into the retained earnings, and the same with expenses. But I prefer using income summary during the manual closing process. So the very first journal entry that we're going to do is to close all the revenues. And if you look at the revenues T account, I had normal adjusted balances on the credit side. To close all the revenues to a zero, I need a big debit to consulting revenue for the full amount, another debit on the very next line in your journal to rent revenue. If you were to have miscellaneous revenues, any other revenues, you're going to list them all in one compound journal entry like you did during auction. And one big credit is going to go into the income summary for total revenues. We're all done with revenues. The next journal entry will be to close your expenses. So take a look. In this case, income summary will be debited. And if you don't have your total yet, leave it blank and now carefully go through all your ledgers and credit the expenses for the full amount that you have there. So now my wages expense are at zero. I went to the next ledger, it's rent expense. I'm going to credit it for $1,600, and it's better to do it simultaneously in Monopoly. So you open your ledger and you're going to credit rent expense for $1,600. Go to the journal and write it in there right away. Then go to your depreciation expense ledger. Then go back to the journal. Utilities expense ledger, then go back to the journal. Be very careful. Make sure you go all the way through all the ledgers, all the way to your cash short and over. And in this case, since it had an adjusted balance on the debit side, it was my expense. So I'm going to credit this expense now as well. So I'm ready to put my total debit amount in the income summary of $9,755. So by analyzing numbers in the income summary, I know right away if I made net income or net loss for the year. So my next task is to close income summary for the amount of net income in this case, since my revenues are heavier than expenses, into the owner's capital retained earnings. So to close this account to zero, take a look. Do I need an extra debit or do I need an extra credit? And remember, it works as a scale. So it looks to me that I need to put the weight on the debit side. So I'm going to debit income summary and I'm going to credit owner's capital for the amount of net income. The very last journal entry will be to close out drawings. So I had a normal adjusted balance on the debit side for $1,000. So I'm going to credit the account to zero it out, and debit goes into owner's capital. Now, by the way, when you're writing these in the journal, you gotta start with debits. So even though my thinking process will be credit dividends and debit dividends or drawings, if you were to do it for Monopoly, I will start writing with the debits in the journal as usual. So here are the 4 closing journal entries that I was talking about. These are the 4 that you need to write down either in the journal form or just grab a plain piece of paper. That would do it for tomorrow. Here is closing process complete. Take a look. All the temporary accounts are closed and ready for the use in the new year. The only account that is still open will be your permanent account that appears on the balance sheet. In this case, your owner's capital balance will be on the balance sheet at $28,205. We're all done and set for the new year.